Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Jamming with Jason. Hey, today I am talking with Chris Dyer, and this is one of those situations where often I've talked about social media and how it can actually be social, right? That Chris and I got connected from a mutual friend. So, shout out to Phil Gerbicek, who's been on the podcast several times as well. But nice to have Chris here with me today because we've got a lot of kind of similar passions, if you will, right? So, Chris, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, Jason. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so maybe just give people a little thumbnail of kind of who you are, and then we'll kind of dive in. I know there were a couple of topics that we kind of talked about that we maybe get to, but hey, you know what? On jamming, we just never know when we start jamming where we're going to end up going. So we'll see where the conversation takes us today. But let everybody know a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I'm Chris Dyer. I'm a CEO and entrepreneur, and I'm sort of an accidental author and an accidental thought leader. And I say that because I pretty much built my company in the way I thought it should work. And I was totally wrong and I screwed it all up. And then when I realized,
Welcome to being a business owner, right?
right, right, like I can just treat them like it's a sports team. This will totally work, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so once we got big enough and the growing pains got strong enough, I realized I should do something else. Like there's probably a better way to do this. What's the right answer? And to my shock, there wasn't like a single book that I could pull out and say, just do this. And then I've figured out company culture, I've figured out leadership. And it took hundreds of books, and it took me doing thousands of interviews with top people and having a podcast for 10 years to like actually distill the stuff. And from all of that, then someone came along and said, hey, write a book. And then I did 3 books and they did really well. And then I started speaking all around the world. And so I just sort of accidentally did this stuff because I screwed it up so bad in the beginning. Right. So I
Uh-huh,
always tell
uh-huh.
people, like, if you're afraid of making a mistake, you might become a thought leader or a best-selling author out of it. Like your mistake might be so bad, you have to actually become an expert at something. And that's sort of been my path. And now I sold my company just recently, and I'm super passionate now about speaking more and helping more companies, partly with what do they do at the future of work? Because it's really starting to be the cycles are much tighter. And so the change is much faster and the impact on us is much bigger. How do we have a great culture? What does that look like? And then, maybe you're doing that stuff cool, but maybe your company is really bad at having tough conversations or figuring out how to deal with hybrid and remote organizations. So that's like, I'm all over the road. I should probably pick one thing. I should be the in and out or I should just sell burgers to everybody, but I kind of have a pretty big cheesecake factory menu, as you might say, of all the different types of stuff that I do.
Well, I'm the same way. I know some of my friends are like, "You're all over the board, man." It's like, well, because I'm interested in lots of different things, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But it's kind of funny. It's interesting because it's as you said that too, accidental author, accidental, kind of thing. And I was having a discussion with a student who's working on their master's project right now. So they interviewed me for that. And just kind of interesting, because some of the questions were like, so how did you get here? And it's like, man, if I would have known when I was your age that I would be sitting here right now, there's no way I would have anticipated myself being where I'm at right now. And it sounds like that's kind of the way it's been for you as well.
Yeah, it's one part of, like I said, screwing it up a little bit, and one part of I think just being open to try new things or be interested in new things or to say yes to things. And you're right, I could have never known I would do any of the stuff that I've done, or maybe any of the stuff that I didn't do, or things I thought I would have done, right? I mean, if you would have asked me in 8th grade, I would have told you there's no way in hell I'm not becoming a marine biologist. Right. That was my path.
Yep.
Um, and then I realized I get seasick on boats. So I had to change. You have to adapt. So
Well, and that's part of, being a business owner in general, right? Is you have to learn how to adapt. And and what worked last year doesn't work now. So now you try to figure it out. And like you said, there's no necessarily one right answer. I think which is it's a life lesson for everybody, really. Is there's no right way, there's no wrong way. There's just the way that you pick right now, and then later you can choose and do something different, as well. Because like you said, it sounds like you just sold your business, so now you're kind of at that crossroads again of what am I going to do now? And I'm going to keep doing some of these things, but who knows again where you're going to be 5 years from now as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And if
Well, and
it's
I
somewhere
think,
cooler, then awesome, right?
yeah, well, I'm sure it will be because that's just the way things work out for good people, right? So, but it's interesting. I wanted to kind of ask you too because we talked about, some of the things around future of work, which I know, to me the current, corporate model and what I kind of refer to as corporate slavery kind of thing now, which is not a politically correct way to say it, but it sure feels like that. And so, it sounded like, you kind of went off, you wanted to create your own company, you did, but it's like, but how do you create the kind of culture that you want for the employees that you want as well, right? Because you were trying to make a change or do things in a different and what you thought was a better way. So maybe kind of walk us through a little bit of that because I think it's relevant for both people who might be business owners, but also people who are corporate employees to kind of understand some of the things in that.
Well, it's a lot different answer for what I might tell someone who's a corporate leader or CEO than like the average person. So, I actually think that uh, employees have more freedom now than they've ever had. Um, and the reason for that is that we have more people who have remote and hybrid work than have ever had it before
Mhm.
in the post-industrial revolution, because everything we did prior to the industrial revolution was remote work. Like if you probably went from farm to farm to, put people's change the horses shoes and things like that. You were working remotely. If
Yeah,
you're the
exactly. As
doctor
a
and you showed
horseshoer.
up,
Yep.
right? So jobs went from fully remote to 100% in a factory back to some democratization of work here. So there's a lot more choice. The job market is still very good, still very competitive. And so there's still a lot of choice for people if they're willing to take that risk and to go to another place and do their job. We would probably have less of those sort of shackles or feeling like that if from a political, social perspective, our healthcare wasn't so tied to
Yeah.
an employer, right?
Yep. Yep.
And that feels like the number one reason why we don't have a different healthcare system is because that gives employers a lot of leverage to say, we give you this great package and you're kind of stuck here because you have this great healthcare. And good luck finding that at the next place. But overall, I think they have more choice. And my advice to them is to always, if they can, if they're able, if their situation is not so dire that they are stuck, if they're not happy and if their organization is not treating them like the great asset that they are, they should get the heck out of there.
Mhm.
You should not put up with that. And because all you're doing is making your own life miserable and you're setting the expectation for that organization that can keep treating people that way. And I don't, most companies aren't that bad, but for the ones that are, like, you got to get out of there if you can get out of there. Now, there's people in certain situations and financially strapped, but maybe they just, or geographically strapped, that there isn't a lot of options. And so I don't want to be the fairy tale world here. Not everyone has the ability to just get up and leave when they want to, but there's a lot that are just too afraid. For
Mhm.
the leader and the CEO, that type of person, you had better put the employees' well-being and their uh, experience inside of your company at the same level that you put profits, right? Companies have to have profits in order to survive, in order to thrive, in order to have money to invest in new things and to bring on more people and to innovate. And like profit is directly tied to the not only survival, but the thriving of a business.
Yeah.
but that better be right there on par with how your employees feel and how you the environment that you create for them to not only be okay, but to actually thrive and be awesome. Right. And so that's what we see in the best organizations that I've ever studied is there is this leveling of that thought process, right? That this is not one or the other. It's these two things go hand in hand. We take care of our people, guess what? Profits go up. Profits go up. Let's make sure we're still reinvesting in our people. And they should be constantly, kind of edging for first or second place. They should always be kind of pushing on each other. If and that's what I think CEOs or senior leaders need to be thinking about as they sort of balance priorities.
Yeah. Well, so maybe let's dig in a little bit because, like you said, there's kind of these two aspects to it, right? And so people who are the employees right now, because you talked about, and I totally agree with you about the healthcare issue. I think that it's the one thing that really handcuffs people, and people are so afraid of being without healthcare, and seeing how much it would cost them on their own to have healthcare that they usually stay at a job that they don't like. In fact, a job that's kind of killing them in a way because they don't want to be without the healthcare. They don't want that transition, right? And so there's some of this financial and geography traps that people get themselves into. And the geography traps, again, if you're willing to move, there's lots of jobs, different places, and most of them seem to be kind of hybrid now, but you may have to move somewhere else. And so I know a lot of times people have kids in high school. Oh no, I can't move until my kids are out of high school. Well, this happens all the time. You can move when your kids are in high school. You can just choose to or choose not to. That's up to you. But some of the things from a financial standpoint, and again, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but what I'm remembering is something like 80% of people in this country are effectively living paycheck to paycheck. And if they didn't have income for 3 months, they would be homeless. Okay. Which means that, and we've seen this economically, how the middle class has gotten poorer because of inflation and because of some of these other things. And so I understand, right, why people kind of a lot of people, it just takes everything they make to get by. But what are some suggestions or ways that you've seen, employees be able to kind of help remove some of those financial traps from them so that they do then feel more comfortable in making a change or having the courage to do that.
Well, I know this because I've gotten very curious every time I get in an Uber or a Lyft and I ask the person when do they start driving and why do they drive and what's their motivation? And for a lot of them, it was, well, I didn't want to work for this company anymore. And so they have another way to make money. Or some of them will say, I'm saving money so that I can start a business, or I'm
Hmm.
saving money so that I can leave the job I'm in and I have enough time and a backup plan essentially to be able to support myself while I go find that next job.
Hmm.
And so that's another way that employees have, I think, more opportunity and freedom. There is the barrier to entry for them to go into this sort of go be an Uber driver or go be a Instacart, whatever. Those aren't necessarily glamorous jobs, and you may be doing something that's may feel much higher on the pay scale and the totem pole than being an Uber driver. But at least there's some way for you to support yourself if you want to make that change, right? Or if you don't feel like it's the right thing for you. So, there are scrappy ways. There's a lot of people that get really scrappy when things aren't going right and they want to make a change. And then there's a lot of people, to your point, that just blame it, have excuses, and don't ever
Yeah.
make that change.
Yeah. Yeah, because you can. There are a lot of ways. I mean, the reality is even again, a lot of those Uber drivers that you're talking to, some of them have a regular job and then they're just filling in too, right? As kind of a second job to make ends meet or to, like you said, try to move on to something else like starting a new business or saving up. I know, my son, he quit his corporate job and went to work for Amazon while he's building his business. right? For that same
Yeah.
reason, because the Amazon pay, while it was a little bit less than what he was making in corporate, it was kind of concentrated in 2 or 3 days, longer hours. And so it gave him kind of the rest of the week to then be able to work on building his business. So he's making a sacrifice there. And I think, that's the case probably for anybody. And one that I always try to tell people that I've seen in my life, because there was a lot of my life where I lived paycheck to paycheck too. And the more money I made, the more money I spent, and the more debt I had, right? And that's a trap that a lot of people get themselves into. But there's nothing more comforting than having 3 to 6 months of savings,
Yeah.
right? Is if you actually have 3 to 6 months of cash savings, right? So you could go without a paycheck for 3 to 6 months and still maintain your same livelihood. That's a great feeling to be in, because then you can, decide to make a change if you want to. And for most people, it probably depends on kind of where you're at. The executives that I coach, I'm like, you better have a year to 18 months in the bank, because sometimes it takes that long to change at the executive level. But there's got to be something like that people can do, because like you said, there are lots of jobs out there. There's lots of new ways to make money, a lot of employers that are trying to do things in a better way. But people are probably going to have to make some sacrifices in order to be able to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for the average person, if you can save enough money that you have that freedom, that's great. A lot of CEOs or senior leaders will save enough money or sell a business or do something like that, and they call that the FU money, which is I
Hmm.
can say FU about anything I want. If I don't want to do it, I don't have to do that thing, right? It gives me the freedom not to feel obligated to have to do something I don't want to do because I have enough money in the bank that I can say no and then go do something else. That number is different for everybody. And I'm not going to pretend that most people who might be listening to this own a business. So that's not necessarily the right advice for them. But can you at least create enough of a nest egg that you can take the risk and feel like if you're not happy in your job, you can go do something else, or you can start looking for something else, or you can at the very least start speaking up and saying, hey, I'm not happy. This isn't cool. And if things don't work out, you have a backup plan.
Yeah. Yeah, because I see I see a lot of people now that are, if they're not in that state already, that's why they're starting to do side hustles or other things like that, starting to kind of create their own exit plan, whether that's either starting their own business, right? Or like you said, in looking for another job, taking a second job, doing whatever it has to be able to get things done. Now, from the executive side, and again, because I know I talk to a lot of people, and work is different. There's some generational things that maybe are a little different. And so maybe let's kind of talk through that a little bit, because I like how you said that employee well-being is as important as profits, right? And I think today executives have to have that mindset, because if they don't, then for a lot of different reasons, they're kind of taking advantage of people, but they're going to lose people, right? Because people do have options that they can look for or go somewhere else. So how does that kind of look? I mean, how do executives, or even people who are managing a team, right? Because this is also kind of relevant for them if they have some of the decision making authority. What does this look like? Because again, employee well-being is a term that's kind of thrown out there, but it means different things to different people. What does this kind of look like, or how do you deal with that?
So, in my mind, employee well being is that we manage as leaders the parts of the employee well being experience that we can. So there are things that we cannot control that we have no impact over. Um, where they choose to live, if they choose to live in a house that should house 4 people and there's 15 people in there, there's a bit of chaos in their lives. We don't have control over that, right? So
Mhm.
the part that we control is, are they being overworked? Are we asking too much? Are they taking their vacations? Are they really unplugging when they're off from work? Are we helping them create good boundaries to where, if they're in the office from 8 to 5 today and you notice that they're going home and sending 15, 20 emails, like, how do we coach them that they don't need to do that? Right? To take care of the work when you're at work, and when you're off of work, I need you to be off work, barring some, crazy situation or something, a special project, which happens every once in a while. Like, it's important that we as leaders are helping them reinforce those boundaries, and that we are showing a good example. And if so, sometimes, because as the CEO, like, my hours could be weird.
Mhm.
And so a good example might be like, I might have taken half a Friday off and no one noticed. But then on Sunday, I got on a plane because I had to be at a client thing on Monday or a conference on Monday or something. And so on Sunday, I'm sending a bunch of emails and I'm getting a bunch of work done because I know I'm not going to be available to them on Monday because I'm going to go see the client or whatever. That might show the average employee that I'm working on the weekends or I'm working when I'm not in the office. But it's a little more complicated and nuanced than that because I'm in a different position and I have different responsibilities than they do. So I have to communicate to them, I do not want you to do anything with this until Monday, right? Or I need to say, or if I can't do that, then I need to go in and set those emails to not go out until 7 a.m. on Monday. So if I'm in Gmail or an Outlook, you can delay the delivery of those emails so that people aren't getting them from me as the CEO on Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon, and they're freaking out that they have to reply back to me that I'm going to be mad at them when they're supposed to be hanging out with their families.
Mhm.
So there's so many small ways that we have to help them not overwork, reinforce boundaries, make sure they understand what we expect from them, right? And that we're not expecting it to be on all the time. Um, I know people that get texts from their boss like all the time, all day long. Like, I would never text my employees unless it was really urgent. Like, I mean, really, really, really important. And I couldn't get a hold of them some other way. And that's happened like 5 times in like 20 years, right? I mean, most things are not that urgent. And if I can't, if I send them a note and tell them it's urgent and they don't get back to me, I got to figure it out myself, or I got to wait till Monday, right? So
Mhm.
that's some of the stuff I'm talking about. I'm not talking about standing desks, and I'm not talking about other types of stuff. Like, there's some things around that, or ergonomic chairs, and I'm thinking it more from like the mental health standpoint, like, and helping them articulate what they need, and then also making sure I have opportunities for them to tell me how they're doing and to rate their stress levels, or to rate, uh, uh, where they think they are, so that we can have a discussion.
Yeah, because it's interesting because, like you said, I think that there's there's probably a lot of assumptions that are being made too. Because when I talk to some employees, it's like that. It's like, oh man, the CEO is emailing me over the weekend, and I've got to respond right away. But again, is that an assumption that the employee is making? And it's not. It's like your situation where, hey, the CEO finally has some downtime. And so he or she is sending out emails Sunday morning with no expectation that anybody responds back to them until later. But as an employee, we end up kind of assuming that they need an immediate response. And I think that's one of those boundaries where, we probably just need to do a better job of communicating up and down, on that, because I see so many people tied to their phones all the time and always worried, like, late at night, oh, I have to check in with my email. And it's like, it's 10 o'clock at night. Why are you checking in your email right now? Wait until you're at work, or at 7 or 8 in the morning, or 9 or whatever in the morning, because, what ends up happening so much of the time that I see from the friends that I have, they'll check their email at 10 o'clock at night, and it's one of those emails that comes through, and now all of a sudden they get flustered. They feel like they got to respond. and their minds are going crazy. It takes them longer to try to go to sleep, right, at that
Mhm.
point. And so they feel like they're kind of always on, right? And I think this is where the remote work, the future of work, I think there's still some things to work out communication wise, because I think the fact that we're more accessible, that we can do things, whenever, sometimes makes people feel like they're on 24/7. Right. And so I think that's, led to a lot of overtime and other things like that that people seem to be doing is, they spend all week in meetings, and then at night they're checking emails and sending emails, and so they're effectively working 12 to 14-hour days without even realizing it. And so, you know, how do you kind of get past that too? Because like I said, is that more of an employee perception, or are executives really kind of expecting some of that, or some expecting it and others aren't, and we're just kind of lost in translation and confusion?
Well, there's definitely bosses and leaders out there that are expecting it, which I believe is wrong. Um, there are different types of jobs, right, that have different types of expectations. And so if you're talking about a very standard job at an office where you work a standard set of hours, you should not be expected, or there should not be any expectation on you that you're suddenly answering emails on Sunday at 10 o'clock. That might be a little different if you're in a law firm and there's big ebbs and flows, and there may be a case and suddenly there's a whole bunch of work and they're all expected to work very intensely, and then it drops back down, right? There's a low intensity bit of time. That's different, right? So I don't want to categorize all jobs as in all ways, but what's the reasonable amount of time that you are expected to be on and working? And then outside of that, if it starts to go into that, that's where we get to be big mental health problem, or well-being problems, I should say, not mental health, but well-being problems, where basically the only way an employee can escape it, if their boss is expecting it or somehow they believe that it's expected of them, the only way for them to escape it is to leave, is to go get a new job with a new boss who promises not to do that. Because they don't ever come back to you and say, hey, I don't really like answering emails on Sunday. They just find another job. And you may lose somebody great, and maybe it wasn't your intention. Maybe you didn't care if they answered them on Sunday or not. You just thought they were okay with it. Again, you're not having that conversation with them as the leader. I would say one of the groups of people that have the hardest time with this is sort of that middle manager group. And I would coach them a lot. I would go and work with my middle managers a lot. Um, I wasn't their direct boss, but I would come in and meet with them like once a month or once a quarter, and just trying to do kind of a well-being check-in to see how they were doing. Because if I could get a pulse of where they were, I kind of understood where the company was too. With 4,500 people in our ecosystem, it's hard to get an accurate pulse of like where everything is. But the middle managers could give me a pretty clear idea. I could sense it. And the number one thing they did wrong was that they would go from, let's say, being an employee to being a first-time manager, or a first-time manager to suddenly getting promoted to some higher level. And what they did is they took on all these new responsibilities, and they never gave away, never let go of any of the other work or responsibilities that they had before. They
Hmm.
took on this new role as like, well, I'm supposed to do more, I'm supposed to be more. Um, or they didn't train anyone how to do it, or they forgot to really train someone, and people keep coming to them for the old thing they used to do, and they get burnt out real fast, really fast. And so I would just like literally ask all of them, tell me some of the new things you've taken on. What are some of the new tasks that you're working on? The new jobs, new tasks, new projects. They'd tell me. My next question was, and they started to be able to predict it after a while, what have you let go of? If you took on this new project, did another project end? Did you give some of your other work to someone on your team? Like, you can't keep it all, right? You can't keep adding people to the to the bus if no one ever gets off the bus. Like it just keeps getting more crowded to the point that it won't work anymore, right?
Yep.
So they didn't think that way though. And they thought they had to take it all on themselves. And it was such a relief to them that a senior leader came in and told them, no, do not do that. I need you, if you take more things on, to let things go or make sure they end. Or you're never going to make it. You'll end up leaving. And I don't want you to leave because you're stressed out and frustrated. If you leave because you don't like it here anymore or you think you got a better job, cool. But not because we created a shitty work environment for you.
Mm-hmm. Well, so you've mentioned a couple of times kind of this well-being check. So, for people who are managers or executives, what did that kind of look like? I mean, how did you do this well-being check for employees? What were some of the things you asked? Did you kind of, take metrics, if you will, or other stuff, or what does that kind of look like? Because I think for a lot of people too that are in this mid-level management or executive roles, right? We all started our career before any of this stuff was really talked about. And so I think a lot of us are kind of like, well, I know I'm supposed to do it, but I don't really know how to do it, right? How do I be? Because sometimes it's viewed as like being touchy-feely, or I'm getting in people's business, personal business that I shouldn't be involved in. It should only be about work performance, and even though we know personal life bleeds into business, and life bleeds into personal, right? But how does this kind of look for people who actually want to try doing this?
So there's three ways that I did it consistently that I found really good, valuable outcomes. The first one was what I just mentioned about senior leader going and working with the middle managers that they don't typically interact with maybe that much, to go in and really coach and mentor them in a group setting and say, what are you struggling with? If they're saying they're busy and overworked, coaching them on setting boundaries, reminding them to set boundaries for themselves and for their teams and things like that, right? That's how we reinforce that structure. The second way is I always did a 1-question survey each week. I think the annual survey is complete crap and you should throw it away. It's about as useful as a week-old newspaper. So,
Only it's usually a year-old results. Yeah, because you do
right,
it once a
right.
year.
I would just ask people one question, and sometimes the questions were funny, and sometimes they were really important, and we tried to play around with it. Sometimes I would tell them for like 2 or 3 months, everything you tell me, I will be the only person to see it. I may repeat the sentiment of what I heard, but no one is ever going to see the words you wrote down in this thing. So it's only for me to see, because I might ask them tough questions. And then other times I'd tell them, whatever you write, I'm going to share it with everybody, right? So this is the type of question where I'm going to take all the survey results and hand them to the entire company to see, right? We're not hiding anything here. I asked this question. Here's all the answers I got back, right? Here's what we're doing to address this, celebrate it, solve it, because the questions can be positive or negative. But we want you to look at the survey results, every single employee here. And if you see something, if you see a trend, if you spark an idea, if you think there's something we could do differently, I want to know. And that is always the best way to get great ideas. I have a lot of CEO friends that complain that their employees don't have great ideas, that it's on them, that they feel a burden to have to always be the ones to come up with the great idea. And that's always because they have not been transparent with their people. Their people don't know what they know. And if they don't know what the senior leader knows, how could they possibly have a great idea? They're missing so much of the information, right? It's like asking someone to solve a math problem, but leaving out half of the numbers that belong in that equation, right? It's impossible. So, so we would ask silly questions like, what's been going great? Where should we be improving? What's your biggest struggle? How am I, as your CEO, getting in your way? And so many others. And if anyone reaches out to me on my website or LinkedIn or social media, I have a example list of like almost 100 of them. I'm happy to send to you to kind of get you going if you need a head start on this. Um, I would ask them sometimes funny things like, what's your favorite monkey, or what's your Patronus, which is a Harry Potter thing, just so they would I would keep them on their toes, right? And it wasn't always serious, and it wasn't always heavy, but we had like 95% response rates
Which is
out of
huge.
this. It's
Huge.
huge
Yeah.
because it's one question each week. And then before the next question would go out the next week, I had come back to them with, this is what I heard. This is what we're gonna do. This is how we're gonna address it. And then every month we have a company-wide meeting, and we would talk about those 3 or 4 active questions that we asked them. And again, reiterate what we heard, what we're gonna do, what's been happening. Sometimes it's like, hey, who's killing it for you? Well, if everyone said that Jason is the guy, Jason has been killing it for us this month, well, we should do something special for you, right? Like everyone was saying how awesome Jason is. We're gonna make sure we celebrate Jason, and we come up with something. It could be a positive thing, right? We might bring you on that company-wide meeting and celebrate you, and everyone's gonna sing you a song, or we're gonna do something cool for you, right? Because we heard they told us something, and we're gonna do something. And that was super. It was an important contract over and over every week, every month that we did that over and over and over again. Now, that's all stuff from the senior leader, CEO side. Anyone who's listening is saying, yeah, but I'm a middle manager. I have 10 people reporting to me. What am I supposed to do? You can still do the 1-question survey. It's a little bit smaller and a little bit easier to kind of manage, and what you hear back might be pretty simple, but it's still really effective. But my favorite thing is to do an exercise called bonding. And I did it, always had my teams do it once a day. If they could, once a day. They couldn't always do it. If they were getting it in 3 or 4 times a week, I was happy. And you only do it with the people that you work with on a regular basis. So if you're on the customer service team, you're gonna do it with the customer service team, right? If you're on the sales team, might be with that group. But if suddenly if you're in accounting, Jason, and I'm in sales, and we're on a meeting like once a month or once every 3 months, we're not doing this exercise because maybe I wouldn't know you as well. I wouldn't be as comfortable. This is for the people you work with the most in your company.
Mm-hmm.
And you go around the room and you ask when the meeting starts, how are you showing up? Not how are you doing, not how's it going, but very specific wording. How are you showing up? And you go around the room and people answer. And the first few times they do this, they give you pretty generically, yeah, I'm fine, I'm doing okay, everything's fine, But the more they practice it, the more you start getting the real stuff. Like, we got a puppy and I haven't slept in 3 days. We're trying to crate train, and that stupid dog my wife wanted to get won't shut up. And you're like, that's why you've been so grumpy.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that you're a rude and mean person. It's not that you don't like me. It's that you're tired,
Mm-hmm.
right? And everyone goes, oh, you can see like a relief and an exhale in the group of like, that's why that guy's so grumpy the last 2 days. That wouldn't have ever come out if we hadn't asked. You might hear, I just found out my grandmother is in the hospital and I don't know what's going to happen. And you're just like, I'm sorry, your grandma's in can you get to her right now? Like, well, yeah, I was going to go after work. And this is another way to show like real empathy and help with well-being. I would be like, stop, hard stop, go. Take the day off. If you can get to your grandma and she's in the hospital, go. Right? We're not going to charge you a half a day. We're not taking any PTO off of you. Get out of here. Go to your grandma. Bye. Right? Do not check your emails. Do not call us unless something you need. That kind of like interaction into like their personal life and being able to inject some humanity there created such incredible bonds with the team and with the leaders, right?
Well, no, it's interesting that you say that because I love that exercise, and it reminded me of a real life story for me. I was I was in a board meeting, and the executive assistant in our area, knocked on the door and came in. It's like, you don't do that in the middle of a board meeting, right? And knocked on the door and it's like, I'm sorry, but Jason, I need to talk to you, right? And so I was like up on the agenda very soon in the meeting, right, for my prepared portion of the board meeting. So she comes out, and my mom had been sick for a while, but she actually passed away that morning, earlier in the morning. And so, I think somehow, well, my daughter had called my wife, and my wife had called the office, and, obviously I wasn't in my office, but got somehow to the EA. And so, again, it was like, well, here I am as the employee, like, well, I'm I'm on deck next, right? It's like it's game on. It's my time of the board meeting. And I walked back in, fully expecting to kind of finish the board meeting and then end up leaving and going and taking care of what I need to. And when I walked back in, again, the other executives and the board members looked at me and was like, is everything okay? And I said, well, actually, my mom just passed away. Right. And again, luckily those people had compassion too and were like, well, you need to leave and you need to leave right now. Don't worry, we'll take care of your part of the meeting. Right.
Yeah.
More important for you to go and take care of what you actually need to take care of. But for me, I was even hesitant. I would have just put on a strong face and gone through the rest of the
Hmm.
meeting had they not actually asked me. Right. And so that's where, it's incumbent upon the leader to try to ask that. But I like this to where as you start doing it more, you get to start to see the people you're working with as a human being. And
Yeah.
like you said, oh, Chris isn't, he's not just a grumpy person and being mean to me, or, he hasn't slept in 3 days. I understand that. Or, of showing people that there's more important things in life than just the work. The work can wait, right?
Hmm.
If there's some kind of a thing like that, and it allows, I think once we can start to see other people as real people who have real lives, and get to know them a little bit better, it makes it so much easier for us to be empathetic, to what they're
Yeah.
going through, and really kind of bond as a team as well.
And when we did it this way, this allowed the team to do it that once a day-ish time. And then it was their dedicated time to have that exchange, to where all the other meetings throughout the day, throughout the week, they didn't have to feel like they had to try to reconnect with each other, or to check in on, oh, how's your dog doing, or how's your sister doing, or all these different things, and someone feeling like they have to keep answering that question 500 times a day because people are maybe care or whatever. But when we came in and we had that deep time, now we can go back and get to business, and we've dealt with it, we've talked about it, and we can now not have to worry about it for the rest of the time. So it actually is somewhat of a relief to a lot of people to be
Mhm.
like, let me fill you in what's going on. I told you yesterday that my sister's sick, and here's what's going on. But then the rest of the day, like, we can get back to work, and they could feel like they're not being constantly, in 5 different meetings having to tell everyone about their sister. Um, so it's interesting how it's just as good for the team as it is for the person.
Mhm.
Um, Before I forget, there's 2 more parts that's super important to know about this exercise. The second part is at the end of the meeting, we would go around and ask, how is everyone leaving the meeting? And I found I would get answers from them that were very employee centric. So the first question was very, human being centric. And the second question was more employee centric, meaning they would say things to me like, gee, Chris, I don't think this solution is going to work. I don't think what we just talked about is very strong. And here I was going, I just had the best meeting ever. We came up with all these wonderful solutions. The team's going to go execute on this. And then I would say, how's everyone leaving? And I got 2 people in the meeting going, I don't really know if we're ready to go do this. And I was like, okay, we need to have another meeting. Like, we clearly are not all on the same page yet. Or maybe I There's something else I need to hear that I didn't hear, and I thought it was a good idea, but maybe it's not. So like it really helps us get aligned on how we're going to go do the work.
Mhm.
And so many times, like somebody leaves a meeting thinking that everyone else was in agreement with them to go do this thing, and nobody was in agreement with you. You just didn't get a yes or a no. You just thought they were. And then you're hitting your head up against the wall for like 2 weeks going, why isn't anybody helping me? Why is everyone ignoring me? Why can't I get him on the call? Because I didn't want to do the stupid thing you wanted to do.
Mhm.
And they were too scared, or you have power over them, you have seniority over them, you have a louder voice than they do, and you kind of just shoved it down their throats and they didn't really want to do it,
Mhm.
right? Or they
Mhm.
don't understand why they should do it, or they don't understand what's in it for them, or whatever the reason. So that's a really powerful tool for the leader. And then the last part is in both questions, the most senior person in the room, most senior people in the room must go last,
Yep.
right? We do not. So the always every leader I ever teaches to, they want to go, okay, everyone, learn this cool new thing. We're gonna go around and say, how's everyone showing up? I'll go first.
Yeah. And then everybody else is like, no, I
But
love that. I love that. Yeah.
whatever the boss's energy is, that's what you're going to get. If the boss is upset, everyone else is going to tell you, okay, yeah, focus on that. No one's going to be like, well, I just landed this big deal, right? No one's going to be able to counter that. Or, if the boss is super happy, no one's going to say, yeah, but I'm really struggling.
Mhm.
So they got to go first. And the caveat, the last little kind of tiny tweak that I learned was that if my team was struggling, if I had several people saying they were sort of having a hard time or something was going on, nobody cared how I was doing. They don't have the bandwidth or the emotional tank to be able to also handle the boss's crap,
Uh-huh.
right?
Because it's one more layer just getting added on. It's like,
Right.
sorry, but my give a damn's broke at this point because I've
Exactly.
got all these other things going on in my life.
And so you'd have all these people sharing, and they get around the leader, and the leader would be like, oh, wow, everyone's sharing about how they're all struggling. And then the leader would be like, yeah, and I might lose my house because blah, 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 blah. And people were just like, oh, I can't possibly, this is too much, right? They need a place to talk. And so what you have to do is be like, okay, I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to help my team. How can I help you? Can we give you some relief? Maybe we got to take a little bit off your plate. Maybe we got to give you a day off. Maybe we got to encourage you to go get counseling, like whatever the thing, get you tips on how to crate train your dog, like whatever we got to do to help you. Right. And if I need support as a leader, I got to go uphill.
Hmm.
And this is one area that I've always been a little bit in disagreement with at times with Brene Brown and a lot of people who have talk about vulnerability. Vulnerability is a super important trait. It's an important thing to understand. But I don't think that teams can handle a leader's vulnerability if they are not okay.
Yeah.
So the team has to be okay and functional and emotionally there, right? And doing well if the leader wants to be able to be vulnerable. Only then do I think it really, otherwise I got to go uphill. They got to go up to their boss and go be vulnerable, or to a coach or to a therapist or to a mentor. But the teams just don't ever seem to be able to handle it, especially not in the way the boss wants, right?
Yeah, and it kind of reminds me, even if you think about it from a militaristic standpoint, because one of the my favorite stories was from World War II when on D-Day, and Eisenhower was standing on the cliff, kind of looking as this armada was going across, and he knew, it's one of those things where it's like, those soldiers were going into battle and they knew that many of them wouldn't hit the beaches and how
Yeah.
many of them were going to die. They had a lot of stuff on their plate, and it wasn't the time for Eisenhower as the general. He was there to pump them up, even though, the story is, I mean, he just sat there and bawled like a baby because he knew how many of those men he was sending to their death.
Yeah.
but he had to be strong and stalwart at the time as a leader. Obviously he was compassionate and a great leader, and people loved him just like Patton. The soldiers loved Patton. Think what you want to about either one of those men, but their men followed them into battle. They were strong leaders, but they were also compassionate leaders,
Mhm.
for their team. And like you said, I think that's important too, is it's like, we've got to be compassionate about the people on the team. And sometimes as a leader, we just got to kind of, buck up for a little bit and get through what needs to be gotten through and help the people. And then we kind of go from there. And I know, just kind of interesting. I know we have to cut, because we could sit here and talk for hours about this stuff, but I'm just curious too, because I love this bonding exercise idea that you have here. I've never heard that before, and I think it's beautiful. And one thing I'm wondering about too is, if having this, where again the employees are kind of sharing openly, and you're doing it kind of at the beginning, at the end of meetings and things like that, if that makes the office gossip less too, and helps the culture from that standpoint. Because again, then not only is that person not having to say the same thing in five different meetings, but everybody else isn't also wondering about what's going on with Chris or Jason, because Jason's kind of grumpy today, right? What's going on with
Right.
him, right?
Right.
Because everybody knows, if that actually reduces some of the gossiping and things like that from a corporate culture standpoint too.
Gossip can only live and survive in the dark. And what I mean by that is in these one-on-one or one-on-two conversations where people are talking about somebody else. But if we talk about the thing and we ask the question in our teams in a larger setting, then there's light, right? There's transparency. And so we can ask the question of like, well, how is that person doing? And, and find out the real answer and have a real discussion. But if we leave it to the one-on-one stuff, and this is why this is a whole other topic, but I hate uh I hate one-on-ones.
Hmm.
I think most one-on-one meetings are pretty useless and stupid. And if I didn't mention too, I hate them. It just,
Do you
especially
hate
in remote
one-on-one
and hybrid,
meetings?
yeah, especially remote and hybrid work. And one of the reasons that I dislike them so much is it's the gossip that inevitably people want to talk about things and know things and deliver information to me they would never bring up in a group meeting. And I'm like, if you can't bring it up in a group meeting, or you can't talk about to that person directly one on one, like, that who you're talking about, why? I don't want it. I don't want it. It's not healthy. It's not good information in most cases, right? It's one thing to like let me, hey, I'm gonna give you a heads up, like something that maybe you need to be aware of that you can go deal with. That's different than like, hey, so I know so and so is getting a divorce and they haven't been here in a week. Like, what's going on? I really want to know what's happening. Like that kind of stuff. Like, no. You want an update? Go ask that person. You want an
Mhm.
update? Talk to the like in the team. We can talk about what's happening, how we can support that employee during this hard time or whatever. But that that there was all that people trying to maneuver and say things, and in these one-on-ones I always felt was so unhealthy. And there are time for one-on-ones, there's time for to go and do work together in a one-on-one setting, but the consistent, we always meet on Monday at 9 a.m. meeting because I'm your boss and we're going to have this meeting in place, I it just feels like outdated and sort of useless.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, this has been fascinating, Chris. I mean, I love talking about this kind of stuff. And I know we need to kind of wrap up, just because you and I got to get back to the rest of our day too, right? But and set our own boundaries, right, with our time management as well. But what kind of last things would you like to, I know we gave a lot of information for people, whether you're a manager, an executive, an employee, some of the things about getting rid of some of these traps and making sure that you find a place to work that works for you, that appreciates you as a human, understands your employee well-being needs, and some of the cultural things, again, that managers or executives can use to try to help improve this and focus on the employee well-being issues that they can focus on and that they can help with, to build kind of stronger teams and better cultures. But you know, last thoughts, that you want to make sure and leave with everybody, and how people can reach out to you as well.
If you think about how much time we spend at work, it's more time than we spend with our families, with our friends, and our hobbies, right? The average person spends most of their time working or sleeping. So they talk about how important it is to get a good night's sleep, right? It's such a big part of our day. It's like a third of our day, technically. And yet, work is probably a third of our day. And if we're not enjoying work, if we don't love the work that we're doing and we don't enjoy the people we're doing the work with, that's a problem, right? And nobody ever said on their deathbed, I wish I would have worked more. I wish I would have, gone to that extra meeting or whatever. So if you're not happy with your work, change it. If you are a person in any sort of authority, power, or responsibility to make the work better for the people around you, do something with it, right? It is number one. What can you do to make work better for everyone else, and for yourself?
Yeah.
Life is far too short to put up with that, I think. So, really take a look at it. What can you do to make it better? How can we focus on what's working? And if the answer is no, if the answer is bleak, then how can you leave and go find something else better that you really enjoy and love? Because life's too short.
Yeah.
And you can find me at chrisdyer.com. I think that was your other question.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate you saying that, because it kind of reminds me too of, I so appreciate, what people like you are trying to do to help make the workplace a better place. Because I'm firmly convinced, my opinion is, like you said, we spend most of our time at work, and a lot of the problems in society, a lot of the health issues, a lot of the social issues that we have are exacerbated because of the stress and the poor working environments that a lot of people find themselves in, that end up having a trickle down into the rest of culture, as well. And so I think, anything we can do to make make work better for people, that is more in touch with, kind of the employee well-being side of it, um, the better everything else goes, right? Because if we have all this stress and worry and all this other stuff from work, that tends to come home, right? And we kick the dog, we yell at our partner, we do all these other things, not because it has anything to do with our partner or anything to do with our children or anything to do with our dog, but it's because we just, the pressure cooker is going and we don't know how else to fix it, right? And so, I applaud you and people that are out there trying to help make a difference here, because I think it not only makes work more enjoyable, but it has huge impacts on our society as well. Uh, so so thank you,
Yeah.
Chris. And yeah, everybody reach out to him at chrisdyer.com. And thanks for joining us today, and we'll catch you on the next episode. See you, everybody.
Thank you.